Perfect. So I'd like to formally introduce, we have our CEO and co-founder, Darren Schreiber, 2600 Hertz. And we also have, you got it?
Yeah, figured out.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Morning.
Oh, we also have Asim Bhegani and from T-Mobile, and these two are going to tell you some really exciting things that we're working on right now. So take it away, gentlemen.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely excited to be here. All right, let me get this in pre-zo mode.
Oops.
So as most of you guys know, we've announced a partnership with you guys here at 2600. Really excited to talk about T-Mobile and everything we're bringing to the table for you guys. As you guys know, over the last few years, T-Mobile has been going through a lot of changes, and we've been focusing on the business market. So we'd like to talk through a little bit of that. So you guys know, T-Mobile, we're currently the third largest carrier in the nation, currently the fastest growing. We are the Un-carrier. As you guys know, we have a focus on customers, simplicity, value, and more freedom. We want to alleviate some of the issues that you guys currently have with your current wireless offerings and make things a little bit easier, make your device certification a little bit easier. I know you guys currently have issues with that. In addition, like I said, we're America's fastest growing wireless company, 81 million customers, 56% business growth since 2017, and $43 billion in revenues in 2018. I think the key factor on this slide here is that 56% business growth. I hope you guys see out in the field there's a demand for our offerings for both voice and MI, mobile internet data, from your customers. We currently have 33 million from 2012 to 2018, we went from 33 million customers to 81.3. Again, Q1 2019, another great win, 24 quarters in a row of adding 1 million new lines. That's 1.7 million net adds in Q1 2019. That's 6% of our revenue. And the churn is at 0.88, lowest in the industry. So if you guys add this to your packets and add this as part of your portfolio, you're looking at something that's not going to churn a whole lot. Customers are extremely happy with us, and our service just continues to grow and get better. And what everyone wants to ask about, how is the network growing? What's going on in the future? Our coverage footprint has grown nearly 3 times since 2018. We now cover, I believe it's 98% or 99% of all of the US population, 326 million. Our record, it's a record breaking as far as our growth goes. We quadrupled the LTE coverage and are only looking to get bigger and bigger. I know most of you guys are interested in the technical aspects too. We were a big winner in the spectrum auctions recently for 600 megahertz. That's the low band spectrum that's going to really help propagate across long areas and long distances and cover the vast majority of the US population. Anything there? Oh, okay. The network difference, what makes our network better than the rest? It's a combination of low and mid-band frequency, right? We look right now and you see a whole lot of people talking about millimeter wave, which is high band frequency. Yes, it's great for 5G, but it doesn't propagate well over a long distance and it doesn't penetrate. We have, combined with our potential acquisition of Sprint, the biggest, vast majority of mid and low band frequency. It's gonna help us go twice as far and 4 times better into buildings than the competitors. 5G, what everyone's asking about. What is 5G? I'll be honest with you right now, as we know, it's just a whole lot of talk, right? People have millimeter wave, but something as simple as my hand or a piece of paper can block the signal. This is why we talk about that mid and low band. That's gonna help propagate that, and it's gonna make the 4G LTE experience that much better also. This is kind of the guidelines, kind of the overall view of 5G. We're going to be looking at fixed 5G, which is going to be the fixed broadband and routers, which I think is going to interest most of you guys with wireless failover and SD-WAN solutions. That's going to be the fixed. The mobile is, as we know, the standard stuff, the virtual reality, which is big now, the drones, tablets, smartphones, wearables, laptops, and then the IoT, which we will also be getting into, which some of you guys may be playing in that field right now with sensors and maybe some smart city stuff. That's going to be the standard IoTs, low throughput and low consumption of data. 5G summary. 5G supports a broad and diverse set of use cases. It's not just about speed, it's about coverage and low latency. There's a lot of issues where you're not going to need the speed, you're going to need that fast ping, and that's what's going to get you your customers the experience that they're looking for. Our multi-band approach is really, really unique. If you look at it right now, like I said, most people are focusing on millimeter wave when that's not what we're focusing on. We're focusing on all the different aspects here. And we have, with our potential acquisition, a lot of open system architecture options coming up. Now on to the fun stuff, which we won't get into too much of details here. It's a very simple proposition for your customers. We're looking at T-Mobile One for voice and data for smartphones and tablets for your customers. Very simple, unlimited talk, text, and data. Unlimited entertainment, so they can stream unlimited on there. Texting and data abroad. We're also putting in in-flight texting and 1 hour. 1 hour of data when you fly on a airplane that's GoGo enabled. Unlimited in Mexico and Canada with 5 gigs of LTE, and you get mobile hotspot included in there. We're also offering One Plus, which is the same offering as T-Mobile, but a little bit, some added features, including LTE hotspot, unlimited HD streaming, unlimited GoGo in-flight, and unlimited stateside texting, mobile without borders. More of these details we can get into the nitty-gritty of as the conference goes on. This is more of the key pitch that's going to go with your customers, is going to be the Simple Choice MI. These are pooling data plans that most of our customers in the channel space are utilizing for LTE failover and SD-WAN. I think this is going to be the big play. We do have some custom pricing for you guys that we can discuss after the conference when you want to position this to your customers. We also have a small 2 gig voice and data option also. All right, so we will be outside in the hallway talking if you guys will have any questions about the offering. In addition, I hope you guys check out our truck outside. We have the T-Mobile Experience truck. We have some goodies and giveaways there, some nice swag. So check it out. We got some games. If any of you guys need to do any upgrades, add-ons, or want to talk anymore, please feel free to talk to us. I know that we'll be covering T-Mobile a little bit more on one of the partner podcasts or calls that are coming up and going through the offering. I can't wait to partner with you guys and see where this can go. Thank you. And I'm going to hand it off to Darren now.
All right. Oop, I'm going to grab this. Okay, thanks. I am super excited about this in particular. And let's see if I can figure out how to use a dongle on this laptop. Other side, somebody whispered. Thanks. And I need your code. Very secure here at 2600 hertz. Need a password. All right, so just quick intro because Mike, it's not till tomorrow. So my name's Darren. I'm the CEO here and one of the co-founders of 2600 hertz, along with Patrick Sullivan, who's somewhere in the back who you heard from this morning. Want to make sure everyone's a little awake here. There was a heavy tech dive this morning and features. There's all sorts of stuff going on. But I know a lot of you guys, I actually didn't see by a show of hands, so I'm going to ask you a second time. How many of you guys are current customers who have tried using the Sprint integration that we had in the past? Okay, so good, a bunch of you guys. How many of you guys had some struggles with those integrations? All right, same crowd basically. So we're not surprised on that. We're aware of that. We've actually done a lot of work to finesse the Sprint partnership we have, and we still very much actually like it. So we are not here to badmouth the Sprint integration. I think it's actually still pretty darn cool. But it became pretty obvious that we also needed another solution. And actually, where's Max? Max over there, who's raising his hand, is actually one of the key architects and designers of the mobile applications we have today. And he spent a lot of time on the Sprint integration. And it does a lot of cool stuff, but it also has some restrictions. It has some restrictions on the devices you can use, and it also has some restrictions on the pricing and the coverage options that are available. And so we sort of heard from people that there were some limitations there, but we also kind of knew that was coming. When Max actually first designed the system with me and we sat and whiteboarded it out, we actually designed the system to support every carrier, hopefully. So our vision was that you actually could come in and select which carrier you preferred based on whatever the dynamics are, and then you could keep them all in a portfolio that you resell to your customers. It also solves the problem if a customer says they have a preference. One of the things that Patrick and I have always joked about since day one of running this company is rather than get into an argument with a customer, is cloud better, is premise better, is T-Mobile better, is Verizon better, whatever, we'd rather just be able to say yes, yes, we can do that for you. And so the goal was really that whatever the customer wanted, we could basically help you guys provide that to them. So this is kind of a feather in the cap, so to speak, that we finally got a second carrier because it's taken a lot longer than we hoped. But we're really excited to actually offer both. So one of the first questions that we received when we announced this is, are you abandoning Sprint, especially knowing that the merger is possibly coming? And the answer is no. We are going to continue to offer both services. We'll talk a little bit more about the merger later on, but we expect to continue to provide both these services for the foreseeable future. So what are we specifically going to be providing based on this in terms of 2600 hertz? Well, the first thing is you have to have some background on the differences between these providers. And one of the absolute key ones, how many people here are familiar with the concepts behind CDMA and GSM? Good, most of you, so I don't have to spend a lot of time on this. I'm going to make this short and sweet on this one. We have had sort of an evolution of different technologies that have, for marketing purposes, been called first generation, second generation, third generation, so on. CDMA and GSM are basically the fact that we have large corporations who could not agree on a standard and picked two different standards. It turns out that those gambles get made well before you hear about them, and Verizon and Sprint gambled on CDMA, and most of the rest of the world gambled on GSM. So some people would argue that GSM was kind of the winner, but really what this resulted in is handsets that have little radios in them. Believe it or not, those of you who are around when you might have had a 14.4 modem in your house or a 9600 baud modem, well, those are just in your cell phone now, right? Those haven't actually really gone away, and there's basically a concept of a modem that's in your cell phone and a radio transmitter and receiver, and there's different technologies that power that. And CDMA and GSM were basically the primary ones that we worked with before. And one of the things we were tied to when we chose Sprint is we were tied to CDMA, because Sprint uses CDMA. And that meant we were tied to handsets that have CDMA in them, right? So that immediately excluded a lot of devices. And I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. But the T-Mobile partnership we have now introduces the idea that you would also be able to access GSM networks. So a little bit more detail on the differences between these two networks. The main ones I'm going to point out, you can hopefully read the screen from back there, but the main ones I'm going to point out are the SIM cards and the carrier whitelist. Right? On CDMA, it's up to the carrier to basically keep a database, or at least that's how most of them implemented this, that when your phone goes to check in and try to join the CDMA network, it has to be authorized, which gave the carriers the capability to exclude or include device types. Right? So then you were actually able to say, okay, my phone is CDMA, but my carrier has to approve that device. And if you guys were here from the beginning with our Sprint integration, you were actually here when even the carriers were not used to unlocked phones. They did not like this idea. You can actually thank Google for pushing that through, because there was a lot of lobbying to get rid of that. But initially, it was a marketing scheme. In fact, Sprint actually had restrictions on us that we could not sell, and you guys could not sell devices that were more than a year or newer, right? So the new iPhone, you couldn't sell that. The new Android, you couldn't sell that. And so right off the bat, we were a little bit crippled with our ability to entice customers to utilize this service. So that is one of the big differences with GSM. GSM, effectively, the customer information is on your SIM card. Right, so if you can put the SIM card into the phone has the correct bands, which is the radios inside the phone, to use T-Mobile's spectrum, and that customer information's on there, it generally will work. Right? It removes that whole need to figure out what kind of devices is this in. You basically just put the SIM card in, and if it connect to the radio networks, then it's happy. So that's a big, big difference. But the other thing that's also happening is 4G LTE. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I'm just going to tell you that, boy, we have a cutthroat industry in mobile, and so anything that they can say that makes a consumer buy a phone, they'll say. 4G and LTE were very specific standards. In fact, they were specific standards in some cases about the amount of capacity that you would receive as a user on the network as well as the tower. Things were pitched like 1 gig to the handset in bandwidth would be considered LTE. Right? A lot of the carriers started putting this on all the phones before they had actually reached the ability to provide the service at the level that the standard described, which has led to all sorts of other interesting, cute things like LTE-A, and I don't remember how Sprint's pitching the newest LTE, enhanced LTE, and there's all sorts of other variations, which frankly in some cases are cool new technologies, in other cases are an admission sort of through marketing that's like, oh yeah, we finally have the thing we said we had last year, right? So some of that's been a catch-up game to get marketing out, and we're now seeing the same thing go on with 5G, and there are some significant differences in 5G. But more importantly, something that has not changed is spectrum. And as these two carriers duke it out with Verizon and AT&T, and possibly someday we'll have partnerships with those guys too, a very important thing is emerging, which is that the towers themselves are becoming less important, and the spectrum that you have licensed to use is becoming more important. General rule of thumb, the lower the spectrum, the more likely it's going to penetrate objects. Right? So when you hear people talking about 600 megahertz, like T-Mobile's talking about, it means that's probably going to work much better indoors, right? Or through a window or a wall. When you hear Sprint talking about how they have all this capacity in the millimeter wave or high band spectrum, that it means their equipment is going to be much faster, but as soon as there is an obstruction between the device and the wireless tower, that signal is going to cut out. Right, so the war right now is less about where are your towers and much more about can I get direct access between the tower and the user who's using it, and what's going to happen if there's some sort of interference there, and can we use multiple frequencies to try and work around that so that when conditions are good, your signal's fast, but when conditions are poor, your signal's still tolerable. Right, so that's where the 5G kind of world is revolving around. And of course we have really crafty marketing departments who are going and making all sorts of more interesting, confusing statements like 5G evolution, which I honestly don't know how that got approved and put out. I don't know if you guys watched the news on this, but Sprint, I believe, is actually suing AT&T for confusing the customer on this, or is at least lobbying to have the FCC, or not the FCC, but the Federal Trade Commission, because this is really kind of false advertising. But the idea was supposed to be that AT&T was saying, look, we have a roadmap to get there and evolve into 5G, so we're just going to go ahead and call this 5G-E, E standing for evolution, because we kind of have it sort of, not really. So the consumers are already like, I don't know what the hell's going on, and that's probably going to continue. So hopefully you guys, since you have relationships with a lot of these consumers, can actually sell them on this stuff and actually teach them a little bit, as long as you understand it more. And one of the funny things that I think is a little bit lesser known, I don't know if I have it on the previous slide, but oh, I do. 4G actually is probably going to be around for a while, and frankly, it's probably good enough for the next couple years. You may get slow service on your phone when you're near a particular tower because the tower's overloaded collectively with all the users around it, but the actual underlying technology should support 100 megs when it's properly deployed, up to a gig in some cases to each individual user. So if the carriers continue to enhance their capacities at the towers, and in addition the handsets and the towers get better at the old LTE stuff, even when you're out of 5G range, or there is no 5G service, you may still get basically broadband kind of quality to your cell phone. So what you guys hear and what you guys experience are actually going to be two very different things over the next few years. And one of our goals at 2600 Hertz is we're not really sure who's going to win. So we're going to have multiple horses in the race here. That's kind of our philosophy is if we can make sure that we empower you guys to pick, then you guys can pick. And we'll figure out who the winner is from that. Except these guys, but anyway. Okay, so let's go into some sort of logistics, tactical things. First thing you're probably going to experience, or well, let's ask another question, but I'm sure it's going to be the same answer. How many people who played with the Sprint integration prior had to navigate device procurement and SIM cards, getting SIM cards? All right, a whole bunch of hands. How many people thought that was a fun experience? No, one person. Okay, so I don't believe you, but we'll talk later. I'd really love to know how that's possible. It turns out that, and I'm teasing, it turns out that Sprint has a lot of different types of SIM cards, and the reason is that they actually put different information on the SIM cards to tell the phone how to use the network based on the type of phone it is and the radios in the phone. But that means that you have to get the right SIM card and know which SIM card works with which phone. And because these SIM cards, can anyone tell the difference between these SIM cards? No, of course you can't, because the tail is in the tiny little product SKU at the bottom. And you're supposed to, I don't know, tattoo this on your arm so when you're talking to a client, you know which one you're supposed to give them. I have no idea how that was really supposed to work, but it's been a challenge. And so luckily the newer phones are now all using the same Nano 3-in-1 SIM cards for Sprint, so that's actually become less of a problem. But older models of phones still require certain special SIM cards, and you have to know to get those. And there's a limited number of places you can get them. On the other hand, T-Mobile has a totally different network and a different approach. Frankly, their SIM cards are, God, I'm not trying to insult T-Mobile, but AOL CDs, right? You can find them everywhere, right? You guys remember when you used to get those in the mail all the time? You can walk in anywhere and get a T-Mobile card. One of the T-Mobile folks was in our office the other day, and we said, oh, we don't have any T-Mobile SIM cards. And he said, oh, I have 50 in my backpack, right? These are much, much more accessible. So you don't have to spend $10 and have them overnight shipped to you, right? We can acquire these things. They do cost money. I'm kidding when I said AOL CDs. We don't want to just throw them in the garbage like those things ended up. But they're much easier to get a hold of, and they work with every device. So this simplifies right off the bat the user experience that you're going to have when you're trying to activate these devices, which is a huge, huge deal because we had a ton of complaints that it was really complicated to get phones on the network previously. So that kind of goes away, which is a big deal. And also I'm noting the 3-in-1, the industry itself has gone through some iterations on the size of the SIM cards, and some genius figured out that they can just make little pieces of plastic around the larger ones and you just push them out. So that basically this card should fit any device. So one card to rule them all. Another thing that we've been limited on, which we are no longer limited on, which I'm super excited about, is stuff like this. Who ever thought that I would wear a watch? Because I don't wear pants or a watch normally. Generally speaking, this has been a super fun adventure for me. It's kind of changed my life. In fact, I'm hoping that I'll be a little bit less pounds up here by next year thanks to this thing. Counts all my calories. Really like this thing. But I'm also super excited that it has a cell phone on it, which I think is kind of game changing. Haven't actually figured out whether it's really practical to replace my cell phone in full, but I have secretly taken a couple conference calls in a hot tub, which is pretty exciting, and because it's waterproof too. And no, I'm not pitching Apple's products necessarily, but I am pitching the fact that where these SIM cards are going and where these mobile services are ending up is definitely changing, right? So you're going to see these devices, not just IoT, but you're going to see them on your wrist, you're going to see them in tablets, you're probably going to see them again in laptops. There was kind of a previous attempt to ship Chromebooks where they already had a cell phone service in them or data services in them that kind of died out, but I have a feeling that's going to come back. We're seeing cars that come with cellular service built into the cars. All these things are most likely going to be powered by an eSIM or a SIM somewhere, and so if we ride this wave, we're hoping that we can help you guys get these different devices connected. Because at the end of the day, the customers are still usually very confused by all this, and they need folks to help them out with it, and that's why I think that T-Mobile with us and with you guys will still be very successful, because you guys can basically teach the customers how this works, and you can bundle these packages into all these different types of devices, and you can sell it to the customer, and frankly the customer doesn't care as much about the price as they do about it working, right? So they do care about price, but they're even more sensitive if it doesn't work or it confuses them. So we think this is a big opportunity. The other thing that I just want to point out back to the network side, how many of you guys heard my talk previously about cell phone towers and outsourcing them? And okay, so not a lot of you. So I chose not to talk about this again because of time constraints here, but a little known secret in the cell phone world, who can guess as to what is required to set up a cell phone tower? You can just shout out a couple things. What do you think you need to do to set up a cell phone tower? A license. You need a license for the spectrum and to actually put it in a particular location. That's true. What else? Land. That's a big one. You need real estate. Right? You need a physical place to put it, and let's go a little deeper on that real estate, right? You're in the middle of a big city. Are we talking about just a plot of land that happened to be sitting there that's worth $10 million or $1 million in San Francisco, who knows, that's got nothing on it? Or are we talking about somebody who's already got a building, right? So in some cases in a city, you're putting this on a roof. So these companies came along and said, you know, all these cell phone companies are really bad at negotiating with landlords, right? That's like they're just not good at that. What if we do that for them? And what if we also take care of some of the licensing and the zoning and et cetera, et cetera? It turns out that was a really good idea. If I had chosen another business to be in like 10 or 15 years ago, it'd probably be this. Because these guys are kind of secretly powering Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile. All these guys have ended up on the same space as the same plots of land. In fact, when you look at the towers, you'll see multiple different looking antennas. And a lot of those are the different carriers, but they're all on the same tower. Right? Because a lot of the work is now going into the spectrum, not the location. So when these guys also come out and they say, we have the same 99% coverage as everyone else, that's why. They're just having these guys do it. And these guys are the ones who literally, there's some really cool videos from American Tower actually, of them having to upgrade a tower that's on top of a mountain in Tahoe, where they had the helicopter and the engineer who had to change the antennas out. It's pretty cool. Totally not what I'm into. I'm definitely never gonna do that. But anyway, the point being that as you watch these networks, it's really much more interesting to look at the spectrum and the coverage, the spectrum and the technology behind it versus the physical coverage. So that's kind of changing as well. But this is gonna be the big factor that I know you guys all relate to. Most of these mobile companies, they have a certain amount of capacity on their networks. The reality is they're really selling wholesale services to us, and to consumers, they're really kind of tricking you based on statistics into buying plans that are based on capacity, right? They don't wanna sell too much and then have people use too much, and then the network slows down and it costs them a lot of money on the backhaul. But they still need to be competitive. If you actually read their quarterly reports, which are all public, you will actually learn that they judge themselves and the industry judges them on the annual revenue per user or active subscriber, right? So they want to see a certain number roughly to show the business is healthy. And they look at the rough dollars per gig that they advertise, or basically capacity numbers based on usage, right? So if you actually break down most of the pricing that you'll find out there that is public, we're ending up in around $4 per gig in T-Mobile world versus $8 per gig in Verizon, AT&T, and Sprint, right? Which is why T-Mobile historically has been so disruptive, because that's a real FU to all the other carriers, right? If somebody comes in and halves the price and successfully then pitches it and makes it look cool, that's really disruptive. And that's why T-Mobile has been so disruptive. Ironically, on the flip side, and even though the folks from T-Mobile obviously are slightly biased, they also are aware, and why they're excited about this merger, that T-Mobile owns a lot less spectrum, right? And Sprint owns a whole bunch of spectrum. So the combination of those two carriers will actually hopefully beat what is currently available to AT&T and Verizon, who still beat both T-Mobile and Sprint, and we're going to talk about that more in a minute. But this is going to be a big driver for you guys. You're going to be able to now access lower pricing in places where you're just going to want heavy data usage, and I think that that's going to be a big opportunity for you guys. I kind of dig into logistics here. The one downside we're going to have with porting, but it is temporary, or with T-Mobile right now, but it is temporary, is if you're activating a smartphone, we cannot yet port numbers. That is not a deficiency in T-Mobile system, it is ours. We're trying not to roll out products that require lots of support tickets anymore. We've decided that it's worth it to get it right on the technology first, rather than torture you guys with back and forth with support tickets, and also with labor costs from our staff who have to manage the support tickets. So today we're not actually accepting port requests on the T-Mobile side. You can still do them automatically on the Sprint side if you're trying to activate a smartphone, and you can activate a new number on the T-Mobile side. I expect this to be resolved within a month. And then you'll be able to actually port your existing smartphone number over to T-Mobile as well. But the reason I'm less concerned about that is our bigger opportunity here, in my opinion, is data. And nobody cares what the phone number is on a data device for the most part, right? They just want the backup internet connection to work, or the backup data connection to work, whatever it is on your cell phone. And so the number's not as important. So we deprioritize this, and this will not be in our initial launch here. But the rest of the things I'm talking about, including that price point, are basically available now. And then in terms of the back end, we are directly integrated to T-Mobile's APIs now. So, well, not directly, we go through a third party, but it's instantaneous. That's the important part that I'm trying to drive here. We have a portal of our own, and that portal now gives you access to pull out one of those SIM cards, type in the number, hit activate, and you are up and going. You will get a phone number in the portal that relates to that SIM card, and you can then take that SIM card and put it into a MiFi device or a Cradle Point or a Netgear backup device or a Cisco RV3, I don't know, it's on the slide in a second, I forget the model number, so that you can provide this service to your customers. The other thing that's different than Sprint right now is we don't actually have usage feeds. Again, we wanted to get this out, and it turns out that with Sprint, you pay for every megabyte you use, right? With T-Mobile, they actually do the network management for you. So basically, you pick a plan in advance of how much data you might use up to that you want to spend money on for the LTE allotment. And then if you go over that, they just slow you down. So since you don't really have to manage the data and throttle it and need any of those controls, while we do plan to offer them, we did not offer them on the first day because we don't see a reason to offer them from a sales perspective. We want to start getting activations and subscribers and testers, and we don't need that in order for you to do that. But this is coming. We expect to have these feeds so that you'll be able to see, just like you do with Sprint, how much data your customer used, and that'll also let you guys have some creative price plans that you can invent based on your corporate customers. Another thing that T-Mobile is known for is roaming. Turns out that Sprint has also been expanding on their roaming as well. So I'm going to touch on this a little bit. Today, we do not allow roaming. We have 0 customers who have roaming. The issue is pretty simple. In the US and with our portal, you guys are used to instant pretty much everything. So you can go load an app and it'll tell you how much data you've used this month. And in a lot of cases, that data feed will be reasonably up to date, often within 15-minute intervals. If you actually use our Sprint integration, it is an actual 15-minute interval. If I use data right now and I go check in about 15 minutes, it will show on the portal. That also allows us to have protection on fraud. And fraud is at the point now where these data speeds are so high that if you're getting billed per gigabyte at $8 and somebody downloads 100 gigs within an hour, which is becoming possible on these networks, or within several hours anyway, you're going to get that bill. And you're not going to be able to cut them off, and you're not going to be able to manage that. We've decided that some of those windows are tolerable limits for fraud. But when it comes to roaming international, sometimes those feeds come in 2 weeks later, which means that a fraudster has a 2-week period to defraud you, which gets real expensive. Like, we're talking $100,000 plus bills. For some of you guys, that is a business game-changing fraud hit that could even bankrupt your business, right? So that's a big, big risk. Flip side is I didn't really care about this before with Sprint because it didn't really work anyway, so we kind of just backburnered it. But I've actually been testing this. I took a trip to Australia and New Zealand. I've been to Europe now, and I enabled roaming on our Sprint agreement for LTE and GSM. It turns out those rates have also come down, and in some cases it is actually cheaper to roam. For example, in Germany, it was cheaper than it was in the US for data, ironically. So you can't contractually sell services out there, so you can't say, well, it's so much cheaper, I'm going to open a shop in Germany, but use the US agreement that we have. But I do know that a lot more people are mobile, and they're starting to want to be able to roam, and then it's a deficiency to you guys, especially with corporate customers, to be unable to do this. So we do plan to start testing the ability to do this and figure out where those fraud thresholds are, where you can sell to your customers, maybe you put a deposit down, we do a credit check, and we make sure that if there is a fraud incident, it's not going to bankrupt us, and then you guys are responsible for mitigating that risk and picking good customers and teaching them on your side. So that's probably what we're going to do here to start. And we're going to see how that goes. So that is something we intend to offer, even though it is not available yet. We have a whole bunch of talks on billing tomorrow, billing, invoicing, taxes, etc. But we have fit T-Mobile squarely into this. So we are pretty excited about this. One of the complaints, again, we had on the Sprint side, we actually thought it was cool that you guys could make up your own price plans, and basically you could game the system. So if you knew that a customer had 1 heavy user and 10 users who weren't so heavy, you could sell them a 100 gig plan, and if they only actually used 20 gigs, you'd put the difference in your pocket. That's your profit. Right? So we thought that was pretty cool. And that freaked everybody out. So everyone was like, I don't know how to calculate this. I have no idea how much my customer uses in data. I don't want to deal with this. I just want to set it up and know that I'm going to make $5 a month. So T-Mobile gives us that option as the alternative. You can sell a plan. We discount it a little bit from the market rates T-Mobile pitches it at, so you have a margin already, but in reality, if you try and sell smartphone plans, somebody's going to go say, well, Metro PCI or I don't know, track phone is cheaper, right? So you're probably going to lose that battle. It's too crowded. But on the data side, there's pretty much nobody, right? Nobody is selling a bundle where you get a cradle point and a 12-month agreement with data backup, plus your office IT management and your screen sharing and video sharing and desk phones. There's not really any plans there. So it's kind of greenfield. So our theory is that you guys can now tinker with this and figure out how to bundle a $45 a month data backup plan with a $200 piece of hardware, a bunch of desk phones, a couple of cell phones maybe, and offer that to a customer at, let's say, $300-400 a month, right? And you just kind of flat rate it for them. Your total overall revenue goes up as a whole because you're selling more services to them. So even though the margins might not be as healthy on the data side as they might have been on like a VoIP phone, the net overall account size is going to be much larger, and the amount of revenue you're getting total is much larger. So we think that the attractiveness of this is that your overall account size is going to be higher, plus the customer is going to be more dependent on you. They're going to call you when they need stuff. So as soon as they want to add even more services, they'll be able to do that, and we'll be providing a billing engine that allows you to tie all that together on one bill. A couple comments on support. So with Sprint, you often have to call us to do stuff on support because, there were a lot of restrictions and a lot of gotchas. This is just a SIM card that has a network backing it. Ultimately, the smartphone device is a regular smartphone, and it's going to be up to you to figure out how to manage that. So that is something that we are actually not going to do a lot to help you with. There are some folks who do constant updates. Hey, 6 new models came out this week. We want you to know about them. We're not going to spend a lot of time teaching you about the actual handset market. So that's going to be a place where we expect the resellers to invest on their own. You guys test, you buy your own test phone, you figure out if it's awesome, and then you decide that that's the model you're going to sort of focus on and sell to your customers. We think that's actually an opportunity for you guys because you can differentiate yourself. The market's starting to get flooded with these internet backup devices. It's also becoming more common to have unlocked phones that people just are okay with plunking the $900 down up front. You may remember a couple years ago, it used to be very uncommon to just buy an unlocked phone. You'd expect it to be subsidized, but now people actually like that they can buy an unlocked phone. So we expect you guys to be able to take advantage of it. Kind of a high level on why we're doing this. Some folks said to me, A, if Sprint and T-Mobile are merging, why are you bothering? And B, hey, there's not, like even Patrick was questioning in the beginning with me, why are we selling data services when there's not a ton of money to be made? And the honest answer is that I think that people are also not just going to keep buying VoIP phones. And I'm going to talk about this more tomorrow in my keynote. But I think that most offices are going to expect to get an entire communication suite that works together. We've seen that a lot with some of these up-and-coming companies that Patrick talked about, like Slack, where they're now they started with chat, but now they're trying to put in video screen sharing, and they're trying to put in voice calling, and they're trying to put in conference bridges, because their customers expect all of those things to come from one place. And some of these guys even expect the apps like CRMs and whatnot to talk to each other. So we think this is just another piece of the puzzle. In terms of the specific suggested uses we have on day one, we think data backup's a big winner. Cradle points at the top. My favorite model, actually, but I don't know that I want to vouch for this yet, but I'm going to do it anyway, is on the bottom. There's a Cisco RV. I thought I put the model number on here. Well, I didn't. I will find the model number and somehow post it somewhere, but I believe it's the RV425P. It's a PoE switch, so if it's a 6-7 person office, you get a USB port on there that you can put a dongle in that you put the SIM card into. That's your wireless backup. You can put 2 physical landline connections in there, so maybe a cable modem and a DSL modem, or cable and fiber, or something like that. The ports are PoE on half of the switch, so you can plug in the phone. So basically with one device, you can provide 2 or even 3 backup solutions for internet and phone. And it has a VPN client and all that jazz on it. It's about $300, so it's pretty inexpensive to get all of those features in there. Another option, which I shouldn't be telling you about because it kind of doesn't work, but I'm so excited about this that I'm going to tell you about it anyway because I've been using it with my phone. And I'm happy to show you guys this if you're curious. Apple is kind of secretly, quietly adding the ability on their handset. How many people have heard of eSIMs? All right, cool. So a lot of you guys, if you haven't heard of eSIMs, it's basically electronic SIM. The idea is rather than a SIM card, you can take a picture of a QR code basically on the iPhone, and that has the information about the SIM card in it. Right? So basically, there's no more SIM card. Now the carriers all don't like this for a variety of reasons, so it hasn't actually taken off, which is why we can't actually sell it because we don't have a portal to put the numbers in. But there's some secret ways to do it anyway, so we're doing it anyway. But ultimately, this is not productized yet. But what Apple is kind of secretly doing behind the scenes is they're giving you controls on your native contacts and your native dialer and your native applications where you can pick which network you're going to use for data, you can pick which network you're going to use for voice, and you can pick that on a granular level per contact, for example. Right? And the entire interface already now supports this. Right now, we also have a problem with Sprint where our integration does not work on iPhone 10s because it uses VoLTE. So basically, I'm hoping, and that's why I'm telling you about this, that by the end of the year, we will have fixed the VoLTE integration piece in conjunction with the eSIM piece. And you will actually be able to sell your customers a phone that comes with 2 networks. I'm being told that I gotta hurry up. So 2 networks, and basically the customers can choose from 2 native numbers. We can also, however, already simulate this with a mobile app, right? So the usefulness of this is limited at the moment. It's actually more useful to use the mobile app for now. So my hope is that you'll be able to sell the native regular service today with the mobile app and tease the customers with this idea of, have 2 phone numbers on your phone, a work number and a personal number, et cetera. And then once Apple and the carriers kind of get it together on this whole thing, you can transition them to the more native stuff, and you'll still be in the mix for offering that. I'm going to skip that slide here. The last thing I want to leave you with is a comparison chart. So this is the big differences that we have between the 2 carriers. I want to note that they basically fall into device capabilities that from our side of what we can support, and network controls. We have less network controls today on T-Mobile, but I don't think they're as important. But you have much more access to devices and what you can do with those devices. And this is the main differentiator on why I think it's so important to have 2 choices. The very last slide I'm going to skip to here is the competitive landscape. This is the spectrum stuff that everyone talks about. In fact, who sees something in here that one of these does not look like the other? Which one? Nail it out. No. Look in the bot. Dish! Somebody said it. Dish. Why the hell is Dish in here? Okay. So it turns out there's a war for spectrum right now, and Dish had a bunch of it, and they still have a bunch of it, I believe, unless they sold it off already. This slide might be a little old. But the point is that this is where the new game for wireless is now, is who's going to control the spectrum on the different bands, and the colors indicate that high-level, mid-level, and low-level frequency. And so this is where I think a lot of the activity is going to be. And if you look in terms of the merger, today T-Mobile and Sprint are on the right-hand side of the screen. But if you put those 2 blocks together in terms of number of subscribers, and you look at the spectrum that they own if those 2 companies merge, you're going to end up with a chart that's a little bit closer to this. We'll have 3 carriers, but they'll all be of much similar size. And when that happens, it means that the combined Sprint T-Mobile have about as much money to invest in the network as the other guys do, except they'll already have an advantage where they have a lot more spectrum. So we're going to see if the FCC makes a big stink about this. They might make them sell off some of the spectrum to make it fair. But if they don't, Sprint and T-Mobile together will actually come out probably ahead in spectrum and in subscribers ultimately, which is why it's a pretty good gamble. Of course, they said that with Nextel, and they said that with whatever else they did before, so obviously the devil's in the details. We'll see what happens. So that's what's going to happen with the T-Mobile. For now, what's important to you, try it out, play with it, put some bundles together. One really important thing I do need to stress, even though I'm 3 minutes over, is our relationship with T-Mobile requires us to sell these things as bundles. Please do not go home and post a website that says you now sell T-Mobile service. We can't use their brand in the marketing, so you can, it's a little weird how you have to do this, but it's really important. You can't say that you're a partner of T-Mobile, but if your customers ask you who is providing the cell phone service, you can say things like you're buying wholesale time on the T-Mobile network to offer the service. So basically you're a user of the network, but you're not actually a partner of T-Mobile's. That's really important because they have spent a lot of money on their brand, and you will dilute their brand if you go and say that you are the same thing, right? So they're very cautious of that. Same with Sprint, by the way, if you didn't know that. And then the other big thing is to make sure that you actually try out those devices before you sell them to clients and know how you're going to service them for fraud. So those are my big 2 things. And I Questions or no questions? Am I in trouble? Yeah. I'm asking Miriam. We'll do one question real quick. Good question. So our old pitch on Sprint was that you could extension dial in the native dialer. We are not in the call path on T-Mobile, so you will not be able to extension dial. My hope, however, on that combined dual SIM idea is that on the business line, if you use Sprint, and on your personal line you use T-Mobile, you will eventually be able to do the extension and all the regular dialing on your business line with the native dialer, and use the T-Mobile side for the personal calls, and then you'll get that back. But we need Sprint to fix the VoLTE piece. One more question for Ron. I'm getting in trouble. You can do static IPs on data. I thought that was a thing nobody would want, so the fact that you're asking me that right off on the announcement tells me maybe we should have added that. It's very easy to add that feature. I just didn't think anyone would want it. So if you're telling me you want static IPs, we can look into adding that to the portal, and then I see a bunch of people nodding, so clearly we should have added that. So yeah, so these are the types of feedback we would love to see on the forums, and we would love to see in emails, and please, please, please give us all this data, because I'm gonna get in trouble with Miriam if I keep talking here. Thank you all for joining us. I really hope you come along for the ride on this.